Hey class, in this video we're going to go over putting audio files into our project and editing it together with the recordings that we looked at last time. So we're going to look at a few sources on the web where we can download Creative Commons and public domain audio. This is very similar to what we did with the image project, so we'll kind of talk about the different licenses and review that a little bit. And then we'll import some audio, we'll do some editing to mix things together, and then we'll talk about how to export an audio file and post that on OpenLab. So let's take a look at the audio page over here. So in the audio page, there's a bunch of links right here to different websites where you can search for sounds that have Creative Commons licenses. We'll look at a couple of these. We'll look at Freesound and Free Music Archive. There's a few others that you could explore on your own as well. They all kind of have similar features. The one thing that you might have to do is log in. So you might have to create an account in order to download the sounds. But obviously, they're free to use, and the licenses will let you use them as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go over to freesound.org. This is a website where mostly, hobby audio people will record different things and publish them here and make them available to people to use for sound effects or different things in their creative projects. And so you have to have an account. You can actually preview some of the sounds and search for sounds, but to download a sound, you have to have an account. So you'll be able to click join and put in your email, and you'll have to confirm the email. I already have an account, so I'm going to go ahead and log in, and then we can search for a sound. I'm going to look for a dial-up modem. You might remember what that is, or if you hear it, you'll probably, once you hear the sound, you'll probably be familiar with it. So you can see once we search, we get a bunch of options. There's 15 different sounds. We can just listen to the first one and see how it sounds. So that's pretty much exactly what we would expect. So I think this is a good sound to start with. Before we download this, let's take a look at some of the different ways that we can filter through these sounds, because that'll help us understand what we're looking at a little bit more. So you can see one of the main ways to filter over here is the license. So there's 15 sounds, and 8 of them require attribution. That means we have to give credit to the creator of the sound. And 7 of them are Creative Commons 0. That means you don't have to do anything. You can just download the sound and use it for whatever you want. So depending on what you plan to do with it, you might prefer one of those licenses, but either one of those will be perfectly fine for the project that we're working on. If we scroll down a little bit farther, you'll see some other filters that we can add. So there's the type of sound, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll go over that a little bit right now, actually, and then we'll talk more about it when we export the sound at the end of this video. We can also filter by sample rate, and you can see most of these sounds are 44.1 or 44.1 kilohertz, which we talked a little bit about in the last video. And a few of them are 48,000, which is a slightly better audio quality. And then one of them is 96,000, which is like really very high audio quality. I didn't actually see which one. Oh, that's actually, so the first one is 96. So that's higher quality than what we're actually working with our project in right now. But that's okay. We can easily downsample that audio file. In fact, Audition will do that for us, so we don't even really have to worry about it too much. You wouldn't want to get something that's like a lower quality than you're working with, although, depending on what it sounds like, it might really not matter that much. So the other thing to filter by is type of file. For us, again, this doesn't really matter that much because Audition will kind of like convert the files for us, so we don't really have to worry about it. But if you're working on a different type of project that only works with certain types of files, you might want to filter by these different files. And this is a good sort of subset of the different types of audio files there are. And so let's use this as a moment to kind of talk about what these different file names mean and then we'll review this again when we export our audio later. So you can see there's 5 different file types here, and I would say that these are basically the most common sound file types. So this is kind of a good example. I'm gonna talk a little bit about what the differences of these are. So I'm gonna go over to Audition, and we can see our waveform from a recording that we started in the last lesson. And if I zoom in, remember we start to see these little dots, which represent the individual samples of the audio, of which there are, millions. And what these different audio file types sort of correspond to is the way that they save this information. And so if we think about this wave file for a second, let me see if I can make this a little bit. I think that's I can make it a little bit bigger. So yeah. So you can see this is like a tiny amount of audio where I'm probably saying like, the word the or something like that, or maybe I'm saying And as we zoom in, we kind of see all of the different audio information that's encoded here until we get down to these dots, which are the individual samples. So we talked about sample rate and bit depth. That's how much data is saved in each one of these samples. And that's kind of one of the main things that these audio files might do differently. So the first audio file that we see here is wave. Wave is a very common audio file for what's called lossless audio. So let's put a lossless here, and we'll put wave here. What lossless means is that when we're encoding these samples, we keep all of the frequency information in the sample. So remember, if we look at the waveform for a second and go into the spectral frequency, we can see all the different frequencies that are encoded into each one of those samples. And when we save something in wave format, it keeps all of those frequencies. And so the wave format tends to be a higher file size, because we're not removing any data. And it's very common on the web. It's very common for like shorter sound effects, but if you have like a music file or like a whole movie file or something like that, we tend to compress that more so it doesn't take up as much space. So the next one is MP3. This is also very common. So let's put MP3 over here in the lossy column. So lossy is the opposite of lossless. What lossy means is when we save the data from the sound, we actually remove some of the data to make the sound smaller. And there are sort of sophisticated computer programs that kind of guess which sounds are going to be easiest to remove without the listener noticing. So it might say there's a bunch of really high frequencies here. Most people won't notice if those are gone. Or there's a bunch of really low frequencies here. So, it doesn't actually do this, but you could imagine maybe it has like a cutoff, and anything above this frequency, it's not going to save. Well, although this is the amplitude filter, it wouldn't do that. It would be like here. So you could imagine there's a cutoff here and maybe one down here, and it's only going to save this information. That's not really how it works. It's much more sophisticated than that, but that is sort of like a basic idea of what it might do. So we have we have lossy. I deleted that accidentally with MP3, and then we have lossless with wave format. So those are very common. The next 3 are a little bit less common, but they are still quite common. AIFF is also lossless, so we'll put that over here. AIFF is an Apple based format, so it's sort of the same thing as Wave, but Wave is Windows and AIFF is Apple. Then we have FLAC. FLAC is also a lossless program. Compression program. FLAC is supposed to be like kind of the best high quality program, and so if you're like a music nerd and you like download all your files and stuff like that, you might be familiar with FLAC files. You might use FLAC files a lot. And then OGG is sort of the more recent standard of lossy audio. It's used a lot in modern multimedia projects like video games and things like that because it does really good compression. MP3 has been around forever, and it has like a lot of just high level of adoption, and so it's very common, and so it kind of sticks around because it's been around forever. It's not necessarily bad, but there are newer formats that have more sophisticated compression programs like OGG, that are kind of more common for people who are creating multimedia. So that's a lot of information. Basically, MP3 is kind of a good basic standard format that it's going to be a small file size. It's going to sound okay, but not great. And it'll play anywhere. It'll play on your phone, it'll play on a website, it'll play in anything. OGG is also a good compression format that's small, but is a little bit better. It's a little bit higher quality, and it's good for if you're making a video game and you want your sounds to be really good, but you don't want to take up a ton of space on the computer. That's good. For really high quality audio, you're going to use WAV or AIFF or FLAC, and it kind of depends on where you're distributing it and stuff like that. We'll look at these again when we export our audio in a little bit, but for now, let's actually listen to and download some of these files. So let's go back to our browser. I like this first one. I'm not gonna, it's good enough, so I'm not gonna spend too much more time listening to them. You can see some information. This is actually a FLAC file, even though it has MP3 in the name, which is kind of funny. It's 20 seconds long. It's 2.5 megabytes, and the sample rate is really high, and it's 24-bit audio. So that's really good. That's perfectly fine. So I'm going to click download here, and you can see that's going to go to my downloads folder. And so I can just click on this button in my browser to open the downloads folder, and there it is. And so we'll move that over to our project folder in a moment. I'm going to download a couple more things first. Let's get another sound. I just want to kind of go through some other stuff. So let's imagine we want to have some like nice wave sounds in the background. I'm going to just type in waves. And so we get waves in beach sand. This is a wave file. That's pretty nice. I'm just going to go with that. You can see there's a lot more options here because there's a lot of, it's a very common thing for people to record and for people to use as a sound effect. So there's over 15,000 of these sounds. This requires attribution. That's fine. So this looks good. So I'm going to download this. So that's another example. I do want to keep these bookmarked. So what I'm going to do is just leave these open, and I'm going to include them in my post later, so I won't forget about them. So I have my dial-up sound and I have my wave sound. Let's go to Free Music Archive and get some background music. So I'm going to go to Free Music Archive, and this one, let's go to Enjoy FMA, and then I'll go to Sign In. And this is another one where you need an account to download, but of course everything that you download is free. This one has a little bit more of a restrictive licenses in general, because these are like artists who are publishing their tracks, and they are releasing them for free, but I think they want to get some, they want to get their music out there. So they do want people to give attribution and stuff like that. So the thing I like about this is you can search by genre. And so if you're looking for a specific genre of music, a lot of time when you're creating a multimedia project, you want some background music. You don't want to pay for like a famous song, but you want like a specific style of music. So I might not know all these artists, but I do know the styles of music. So I can choose one that fits my project, and then I can listen to some different options. So for my podcast, maybe we can do some electronic music, since we have like a dial-up modem sound, and let's see. So there's all these subgenres, so you can really get very specific. Maybe vaporwave will be kind of fun. That'll be kind of interesting. And so then you can see these different tracks, and we can preview the tracks. That's pretty good. It's good enough for what I want to do. I'm not going to spend a ton of time listening to stuff, just in the interest of time. And so let's take a look at this. If I click on this track, you'll see the license information here. So it says attribution, non-commercial. So that's good, because I'm not making a commercial product, and I'm happy to give attribution. So that's perfectly fine. And let's see what else. So it has some genres. It has this artist. It tells us it's not AI generated. That's kind of a new thing that you'll see on sites like this. So this all looks good to me. Let's go ahead and download this. And it'll kind of show me the licensing information again. Oh, it says this is not compatible with YouTube. That's okay. If I get a content strike, I can just mute it. Sometimes if you upload something to YouTube and it's a licensed sound, they'll take your video down, or they might mute that section of the video. I don't really think I'm not too worried about it, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this just in the interest of time. Okay. And that's an MP3 file, which is going to be more common with music files. Obviously, a music file is longer, and so there's going to be, if you save it as a WAV or FLAC, it's going to be much more data. So let's take a look at these 3 files I've downloaded. So I have this FLAC file at 96K, and it's 2.6 megabytes. So then I have a MP3 file, which is much longer. It's 2 minutes 38 seconds versus 19 seconds, but it's only twice as big. It's 6 megabytes because it's a 44.1 MP3 file. And then I have this WAV file that's 48K. So I've got all these different sample rates. I've got all these different file types. But the nice thing about using a modern software like Audition is it's not going to make any issues with these. We can just use these in our projects. So one thing I'm going to do is rename these files because they have kind of long names, and then I'm going to put them in my project. So I'm just going to right click and go to rename. I'm just going to call this modem. I just want a short name so it's easy to find. And I'm going to rename this file background music. And I'm going to rename this waves. When I give attribution, of course, I'll use the real names of the tracks, but just in the interest of making this easier to use on my computer, I want shorter names. So then in another window, I'm going to go to my audio project, this editing project, and I'm going to throw these files into this project. And then when I go over to Audition, we don't see them here. So this is one thing that, you might run into. But if I want to add them in, I can just click on this folder right here. Or, so there's those files. Or I can just drag and drop. So either way is going to be fine. So if I want to, let's close this. So I can just drag all these guys in here. And you're going to see it makes these peak files because, it's going to represent these files. But now I've got my 3 files here. I've got waves.wave, I've got modem.flac, and I've got background music. And so now I can add these into my project. So of course I'm going to need tracks for these files. So I'm going to rename my track 7. I'm just going to click on this and name this voice. And then I'm going to go to multi-track and add a new, I think, let's check. So the music is stereo, that makes sense. Modem is mono, and the waves is stereo. So I'm going to add a mono track and call this modem. And then I'll just drag the modem in here. And so it's telling me the sample rate doesn't match. And if I say OK, what Audition is going to do is make a copy of this file at the correct sample rate. So I'm just going to hit OK. Oh, and then I forgot I'm really zoomed in. So let's zoom out a bunch, and then we'll move this. This modem sound effect is really long. It's almost as long as all the audio I recorded. So we might shorten it up a little bit. But let's go back here. And I'm going to mute the voice track for a second. So I'm going to click on this M button here. And then I'll just play back the modem sound. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. I'm going to make this a little quieter, maybe -6. And then what I'll do is I'll start to fade this out like here. And then I'll move my voice audio. So I'm going to select all of this stuff because there's a few different tracks here. So if I want to move all of them, I'm just going to use my mouse and drag over all of them and move them over here. And this is how we kind of can start to edit things together. So let's see how that sounds. And we want we want to listen for the level of the audio. It's kind of a long intro. We'll fix that later. The MMP 100 podcast. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm going to bring this fade out even a little bit farther here and bring this here and see how that sounds. Welcome to the MMP. So my voice recording is much quieter than the modem, so I'm going to bring the modem down to like -12, and that'll probably sound better. Welcome to the MMP. Okay, so that sounds better. The voice is still a bit quiet, but for now I'm really focused on editing. I'm going to talk about kind of mixing and stuff like that in the next video. Okay, so we've got our modem. Let's add the rest of our sounds. So I'm gonna make this track a little bit smaller and make my voice track a little bit smaller and make the mix track a little smaller. And then I'll go to multi-track. And so for this one, let's add in the music. So I need a stereo track for this. And I'll rename this track background music and hit save. And so I'm gonna scroll to the beginning. And I'm going to find my background music track and just drag this in here. And again, it's telling me, to fix the sample rate. And I'm just going to say, that's fine. You can do that. And so notice it makes a copy of the background music. So I have this background music MP3 file right here. And it made this copy. It made a WAV file at 48 kilohertz to match our project. So the background music is probably going to be very loud. Yeah, so it's much louder. I'm going to turn it way down. I'm going to set it to like -24. And then I'm going to put a big fade here so that the music is kind of fading in all the way up until I kind of start talking. We're just going to set that for now. In another video, we'll talk about more sophisticated ways to do that. Okay, so we hear the music coming in. Welcome to the MMP 100 podcast. Today Okay, so that's decent. I have a lot more music than I need, so I'm gonna scroll up to like here and just make a cut here. So I'm gonna hit Command K and I'll get rid of this and then I'll fade this out like that. And when we go over layering and stuff like that, we'll talk about how we can do more with these sort of layering and sound volume of these tracks. Okay, now I'm recording again. I don't know what I'm talking about. Because right now what I would want to do is bring the music back down. But for now we're just gonna go over some basic edits. Okay, so now I want to add in my waves as kind of the end of my little piece. So I'm gonna go to multi-track. The waves is stereo, so I'm gonna add another stereo track and call this waves. And so I'll grab my waves file and I'm gonna put it right here. So it'll play kind of as the music is fading out. It's pretty loud, so I'm just gonna set this to -12. And that sounds pretty good. Okay, so that's gonna be the end of my edits for now. So for your project, you have to have at least 5 different audio sources that you kind of mix together. But what those sources are is really up to you. You can play with like different music, background music, or different sound effects, or different voices, different audio sources. Whatever fits your concept for your project is going to be fine. So for now, we're just kind of adding these audio sources in and doing these really simple edits, just moving them around within our project, so we can kind of line them up where we want to. And I'm just doing some basic stuff with the volume and fade in and fade out. In next week, we're going to go over more complex ways of doing fading in and out and matching the volume of things and making sure everything sounds good, which is a process called mixing and mastering. But for now, we're just kind of learning the basics. So we're not going to get too deep into those details this week. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a project here. We've got kind of a draft. And so now we can export this file. Just like in Photoshop, this edit file that we have, this session, is kind of like our PSD. We can come back to this file and make new edits. But the file itself is very complex. It's a large file and it includes a lot of other files. So this session file, that's not very big. But it really is just editing information, and it includes all this other stuff. So there's these recorded files, these conformed files are the files that got changed into our, our project sample rate, and then some recorded files here. And so all of that stuff together, if I look at the size of this, this is 80 megabytes. So that's a really big audio file. We wouldn't want to publish that on our blog. What we want to do is take what we've edited together and make one file, one track that's called a mix down or a bounce of our project. And that's what we'll publish on the blog. And we can go back and make more edits and make a final version, in a couple weeks. So what I'm going to do is export. So I'm going to go to File and go to Export, and I'm going to do a multi-track mix down of the entire session. So you can, do selected clips, or you can make a selection and mix down that, but we want to mix down our whole project. So I'm going to go to multi-tracks mix down, entire session, and I'm going to say where I want to save this. So I'm going to have to, it's not in the right place, so I'm going to go to Desktop, go to Audio, and go to Editing, and I'll just call this editing mixdown. I'll put a 1 at the end of this because I'm probably going to make more of these. And I'm just going to click save. And we can set the format. So I'm going to export a few different formats so we'll see the difference. But what we'll probably publish is a MP3. So we'll start with a wave, and we'll leave it at 48,000 uncompressed, and we'll click OK. And this is a pretty small project, so that happened really, really fast. It's already ready. It's 16 megabytes. It's not crazy, but it's only 40 seconds of audio, so it's pretty large. And that's because it's the WAV audio format. Let's take a listen to it for a second. So it sounds pretty good. I'm just previewing this on Mac by hitting space. That doesn't work on Windows, so you have to open it up, but you can preview it by opening it. Let's go back to Audition and do another export. So I'm going to go to File, Export, and then Entire Session. And this time I'm going to choose MP3 audio and click OK. And so now we'll have an MP3. I forgot to add a 1 at the end. Let's add that. So our MP3 is 1 megabyte. So the WAV is 16 megabytes and the MP3 is 1 megabyte. So you can see there's a huge difference in file size. But let's see if we can hear the difference in audio quality. So I can't really hear a difference. If I listen really closely or on speakers, something like that, I might be able to hear a difference. But for this project, we don't really hear a big difference. So we can, let's take a look. So the other options here are AAC. This is sort of like Apple's version of an MP3. This is actually, I think like a lot of different services use AAC now. AIFF is Apple's sort of version of WAV. Then we see FLAC, and there we see OGG. And so these names look a little bit different, but those are the basic file types that we saw before. MP3 is still kind of like the most universal. So if we want to publish something and expect people to be able to listen to it on lots of different devices and download it very easily, our very small size MP3 is going to be the best way to go. So I won't go through exporting any more files at this point. I'm just going to hit cancel. Okay, and so there's one more step that we're going to do, which is we're going to export the session. And so this is so that you can submit the project and I'll be able to open it and see everything that you worked on. And the reason we're going to do it this way, you could just submit, like you could zip up this whole folder and send it to me. The only case where that ends up with issues is if you are referencing files that aren't in the same folder. And that's a pretty common thing that happens. And this is also just a good way to go through and make sure that we're editing the correct sort of setup. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to export a session. And this basically just like makes a copy of everything we've already got. but puts it into a new place. And this is what you can submit on Brightspace. So what I'll do is I'll go to File and Export, and this time I'm going to go down to Session. And now I'll choose, I'll make a new folder for this. So I'll go to Audio, Editing, and I'm going to make a new folder, and I'll just call this Session, or I'll call this Submission 1. So if we make more of these, we can. And this basically is just going to take a snapshot of where you are right now, and you can upload that to Brightspace. So I'm going to click Save here, and then we're going to save a session file. And then here, where it says Save Copies of Associated Files, make sure to tick that on. This way, when you submit the project, it'll have all the files bundled together, and so I won't have to worry about where the files are. I'll just open it up, and I'll be able to see it. So just make sure that Save Copies of Associated Files is on, and click OK. And now if we go back to the Finder, and we look at our submission folder, you can see there's a session file, and then there's a bunch of copied files here. So the copied files are just the ones that are actually necessary for the session. You can see there's some files that it doesn't have in here. And if I open this up in Audition, it looks almost exactly the same. And it basically is exactly the same. So when I open it on my computer to take a look at your work, that's hopefully what I'm going to see. So this is what we're going to submit on Brightspace. And to do that, you can just right click and compress submission 1. And so this makes a little zip folder, so you can just submit this onto Brightspace. And this is a really important thing to kind of be able to do, because this is really how media files like this are often delivered in a professional or industry setting. So let's go back to Chrome, and we're going to finish our submission. So I'm going to make a new post. And this is going to be like my audio draft, basically. So for the category, I'm going to choose audio and go to weekly blog post. And I'll call this audio draft 1. And then I'm just going to add my mix down here. So you can drag and drop, or you can use the plus button. If you do use the plus button, make sure to choose an audio element. So type in audio and then upload, or you can just drag and drop, and the OpenLab will figure it out. So let's see, where's our mix down? Here's our mix down. Make sure it's the MP3, and it's going to embed that, and you can play it directly in the browser. So you can hear that there. And then just like normal, add a quick description. So for my description, I'll just say, I am working on a podcast about MMP 100. Feel free to, explain what your concept is, or what you worked on, or what you were inspired by. Again, this is just kind of documentation, so whatever you want to write here is good. And then I'm just going to include the links to the files I used. So I'll put my sound sources, and I'm just going to copy and paste these. I'm not going to put the full license information yet, because that's what we'll do at the very end when we finish this project. If you do see something like this where it says embed URL, I don't want to do this, so just click convert to link, and then it'll turn it into a link. So I'll do that with these guys, and it does the same thing. I don't really know why it does this. I mean, I guess it thinks that's what you want to do. It's definitely not what I want to do, so I just want to make sure these are all links. Okay, so we've got our links, and so that way I won't lose those files. So then I'll just click publish here. And so now on Brightspace, I'm going to submit the link to the OpenLab like usual, and then I'll submit my session archive from my computer. So while that's going, we can copy this link, go over to Brightspace. I'm going to go into Learner View, and let's find this assignment. So this is our first blog post on audio, the audio recording, and we're double check the rubric, but you should have everything. So we'll paste in our audio draft, and then we'll go to add a file, and we'll upload our submission 1. So we'll just find that zip file there and click open. And so that means when I download this, I'll be able to see exactly how you edited your project together. So then I'll click add and then submit. And so that's it for our first week in audio. There's a lot to go over this week, so there's a little bit more to do. Next week, we'll learn a couple more things, but we'll have more time for you guys to work on your projects and work on recording and editing and stuff like that. So less new content next week and more time for your own creative process. All right, we'll see you guys in the next video.